Question on road maintenance.
Patton,
Yes.
Fowler,
Yes.
Yes. Steinberg,
Yes.
Turner,
Yes.
and we need a motion to excuse Deacon and Welch.
Second.
Patton,
Yes.
Fowler,
Yes.
Preston,
Yes.
Steinberg.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. And now we're going to turn it over to Chris Courtney, who is going to walk us through this.
Thank you very much. Let me start sharing my screen here. Okay, if everybody remembers, I gave a brief presentation a couple months ago about the pavement management group process of doing a full village-wide roadway assessment. And I started it with a terrific pun, I thought, using technology to drive better decision-making. And it did not go over particularly well, which you'll learn about me, I have a very long memory. So I'm going to try a different tack today. If this works, hold on one second. We'll go with plan B. Let's do this then. Hold on a second. Okay, so one of the things you'll learn about me is some of the people indicate that I'm the strangest friend that they have. My wife calls me a big goofball. I'm also a huge SpongeBob fan. So anytime I have an opportunity to work SpongeBob into a presentation, I do so. SpongeBob's mom, by the way.
Please stop touching my head. Let's all sing the road song. I wanna sing it all day long. Let's all sing the road song. Let's all sing the road.
Okay, so we want to avoid that. We want to avoid that ending with what we're doing. So if you have not been introduced to SpongeBob by your grandchildren or your kids, you now have, and I would highly recommend him. He's hilarious. So there's a couple of things that we want to try to accomplish this evening, and that is to educate council about what road maintenance is, how it works, what the approach of it is, how we are talking about a philosophical shift in the way that we're approaching our road program in the village. Historically, we've allowed the budget to fulfill the need. We've used the money that we've had available to address as many needs as we can. We now have, through a village-wide pavement assessment program, determined need, and we're going to be discussing a budget number or numbers that would be appropriate to meet that need. So it's kind of a, he should be able to. I'm sharing my screen on the Zoom meeting, so everybody should see it. Also, what we hope to do is hope to better prepare you to answer questions from villagers regarding their roads. You know, people generally call and say, my road's in terrible shape. You know, what are you going to do about it? And we now have better numerical data that ranks all our roads from worst to best. So if somebody calls and says, my road is terrible, that may be beauty in the eye of the beholder. Their road may be very much midway in our roadway condition as compared to others. So I hope to prepare everybody to have those conversations and have better data to do it. I want to summarize the pavement management group roadway assessment that was done for the whole village. talk about some differences with the way that roads are programmed. Local streets are handled very differently than state and county roads from a rebuilding standpoint, and explain how those work a little more completely, along with discussing how outside funding opportunities work for state and county roads. In addition to that, we want to talk about the pavement management life curve. So every, and there'll be some graphs later on, but a pavement has a life. And the more effort you expend in maintaining that roadway, the longer it will last. Hence, you can extend the curve out further and further, maximizing the time before you have to get involved with the complete rebuilding of the road. And that's ultimately our goal of roadway maintenance, is to extend that timeline before we have to get in and completely rebuild a road for as long a period of time as possible, thereby trying to save some dollars in the meantime. I'm going to talk about what a framework for an annual road program looks like, given the data that we now have based on a PCI, or pavement condition index approach to looking at the roads. I want to discuss the overall objective that we're going to hopefully have, which is to overall long-term raise we want to take our pavement condition index average for the village, and over time we want that number to go up. Right now we're at 62, and ultimately what we'd like to do is get it up to 70, which is the low end of the good range. Want to review the estimated need based on the pavement condition index analysis that was done. So we calculate what the total need is in terms of dollars to reconstruct roadways that are in the worst shape. And also present some sample 5 and 10 year road programs that are based on the overall objective of raising the PCI. And then set the table for council to have some meaningful discussions on 5 year, 10 year, how many dollars per year, whether or not we're going to attack a certain type of road first, or whether we're going to segregate them into more discrete groups and allocate more dollars towards high volume roads versus low volume roads. So that's kind of the overall objective. So this may look familiar. This is just a brief overview of the presentation that I did previously, talking about pavement management group and what the benefits are of their program, really getting us to a consistent analysis of the roadways using a uniform process and artificial intelligence, as opposed to potentially different people looking at the roads under different weather or environmental conditions, and maybe having some variability in the analysis that we can now remove. So we've got a much better analysis process in place. Ultimately, what we're trying to determine is the best points in time and how many dollars we're going to be allocating to these various pavement maintenance activities. Reclamite and crack seal you use on newer roads that are in better shape to help extend the life. They're low cost treatments that can buy a lot of time towards the end of the pavement life. Also, when you get into the more middle PCI roads, things like chip seal, fog seal, thin overlays, milling and filling either partially or the whole surface. And then when you get into the lower PCI roads, it comes time to rehabilitate them or reconstruct them. Difference between rehabilitation and reconstruction would be, rehabilitate would be like what we did on Deerfield, Riverview, those roads last year, where we did a recycling of the existing asphalt and then overlaid it, as opposed to a pavement that may not be suitable for that, where we've got to reconstruct it, where we've got to tear out the whole road and start from the bottom up. So really where we are. Yeah, I've got that a little bit later on as I get more in detail on the pavement maintenance methods. So really, we've completed the roadway assessment, which I'll summarize in a minute. And really, this evening, we want to discuss need and budget. So also with elevating the knowledge of council regarding the whole process. So really, that's the focus of what we're looking at today. So just a summary of pavement management group and what really ultimately allow us to make better spending decisions based on a strategy that we've determined in advance, as opposed to being more reactionary, and a strategy that is based on the long-term goal of raising the overall PCI, or pavement condition index, for the roadways in the village. That's the home run that we're looking for. So here is the results of the overall pavement analysis that we had done. You may see in the lower corner right here, green roads are excellent, blue roads are good, purple roads are fair, yellow roads are poor, black roads are failed. And I'll touch on what each one of those means. This is every road in the village, excluding private streets. So this is state, county, and local roads.
County line south of Mayfield, I noticed it's not highlighted on there. So is that?
I think it may just be an anomaly on the graphic, but you're talking right in here. Oh yeah, and down here. Yeah, I think it just wasn't picked up on the map. So, but it has been included. So you can see that we've got any number of black roads which are considered to be failed, which are in need of either rehabilitation or reconstruction. Yellow or in poor condition, which are the ones that are on their way to becoming failed. Really everything black and yellow fits into the rehabilitation reconstruction category. Everything purple, blue, or green is either middle of the road or in very good shape, where we would employ life extending methods in order to try to get them to last as long as possible before they slip into a failed or poor category, or black or yellow. So if you look at these are the just samples of the spreadsheet that we get from pavement management group. Everything is segregated by roadway, and then it's got a variety of different information regarding road length, width, square yardage, the different limits that have been analyzed. Ultimately, it determines what the pavement condition index is. And it also, which is critical to what I do, is it identifies in the last couple columns, which you can't see but are important to me, it determines what the type of failures are that have been measured, which are more environmentally based, which would be weathering due to sun and environmental conditions, kind of top-down weathering of the roadway, which does not compromise the integrity of the structure of the road, as opposed to they've got a column for load-based failures, which is more bottom-up, where you've got loss of support underneath the pavement that really results in a need for much more work in trying to renovate the pavement. Critical items here that we're looking at is, and I've got one of these charts next that I'll go over, but our overall pavement condition index right here is 62. That's how we came in for the entire village. That's the average of all the village roadways, including state and county roads, which is, I would call that pretty typical. The engineers that I've talked to, when they've had this analysis done, in their towns, they've been in the low 60s overall. And here we get in.
Chris, that's weighted by length of the road.
That is a weighted average based on pavement area and condition.
And Chris, over time, if we're 62 now, if you go back 10, 20, 30 years, is that where we've tended to be?
I would say it probably runs, given the way that we've approached the roads, we've been kind of keeping the water level right about the bottom of our nose. I would say that's pretty consistent. I would say some of them we may have slipped in some areas, especially the roads that we currently have right now that are failed. We've been pretty consistent with the amount of money that we've spent on an annual basis. And that's managed to keep, I think, the pavement condition index about at that point historically. I'd be surprised if it varied by more than 2 or 3 points if we were to have done this 10 years ago.
Chartley's failed, and all the roads were redone in the water project except our street because we had water.
Mhm.
So it stands to reason that that's probably why it wasn't redone.
Yeah, and I've got videos of samples of the roadway, and you'll see, and Charlie is one of them. You'll see, we have a lot of the problems we have with the 2-lane asphalt roads with no curbs. We get a lot of edge failures as a result of no restraint on the edge of the pavement for the asphalt pavement. So if you get any soft soils, it immediately starts to push to the outside, which is, and you'll see in the failed roadways, that's a lot of the problem that we have. Here you can see what the scoring system is from a pavement condition index standpoint, where excellent is rated from 90 to 100, good is from 70 to 89, fair is from 50 to 69. And then the two categories that we really drill into here this evening are poor and failed, which are going to be our roadways that fall below a pavement condition index of 50, which means that they're beyond the ability to reasonably spend money to try to extend their life. That's throwing good money after bad. They're at the point where they either need to be rehabilitated or reconstructed. So we've really used those two categories to establish the need for what we need to do from a large scale road construction standpoint.
Before you take that chart, David, the pavement area. Lane miles, 92, really divide that by 2 to get the length of total roads in our village, right? 'Cause lane miles is
Multiply it times 2. Yeah, because a lane mile is just one side of the road.
just one side. I have that.
Yeah.
Now, when they assess a road, Chris, let's just say for argument that the left side of the road is not in good shape. The right side is. Do they get that specific?
Well, we have they look at the pavement full width, and the assessment is for the full width pavement and amount of failure area on that pavement for the full width pavement. They don't separate left side, right side. However, we have access to the video for every single roadway. So we have the ability to look at that video and get a pretty good feeling for if it's a lopsided failure or not. So that would come more, not in their assessment, but in our review of the video and determination of what the scope of any project is going to be on that road. So talking about lane miles, and just to touch on the lane mile, Mayfield Road is 4 lanes wide. So 1 mile of Mayfield Road is 4 lane miles because it's 4 lane wide, just so everybody's aware of that. So looking at our lane miles by condition, so you can see we've got 22 lane miles of poor or failed pavement. And again, those are the critical categories that we're really looking at that warrant reconstruction. The other categories from excellent, good, and fair, those are the ones that we can use not full reconstruction methods to extend their lives. And that's also a key part of the program is we want to invest money in those roads early in their life to extend the life of them before we get into fail or poor. And I've got some graphs that show the pavement life cycle that shows how that works.
It's the PMG evaluation is purely on the surface, right? Three-dimensional.
Other than looking at surface deflection with their program that would identify a load-based failure, no. It's based on video and then artificial intelligence analysis of that video. They don't do any coring or anything. That would come through the design process.
Chris, how does the 62 overall average, how does that compare to other villages around here like Hunting Valley or Worland Hills or whatever?
I'm not aware of anybody in close proximity that has had it done. So I can't answer that question. But I know an example that I've used in the past is the city of Greene down around Akron. I've got a good friend who's the engineer down there, and I've talked with him extensively about this and his staff. They had their first analysis done. It came in at 63. They've got a pretty extensive road network. So I think that's generally we're about where the average would be. You'll see, we've got, you can see our arterial or state routes, collectors, county roads are in pretty good shape. And I'll touch on a couple other sites. We've got a couple other projects that are going on. Som Center's being redone right now. When that's done, the arterial or state route PCI will be up to 70. So, that'll be right at the target number for our state routes with the work that was done on Mayfield a couple of years ago and now the work that's being done on Som. And then there's also some work that we could potentially do on Schooner River Road south of Old Mill next year that would elevate the county road PCI to 70 as well. Our real stickler is this number right here, which is our low volume residential roads. And so let me just talk real quick about how these are separated. We took the PCI that's overall for the village and broke it down into the different types of roads that we have. So we've got state routes, which would be Mayfield, Som Center Road, Old Mill, Schooner River Road north of Old Mill. That's a state route. Schooner River Road south of Old Mill is a county road. We have our county roads. There's a whole list of them. It's something like Berkshire. Yeah. Mhm. So we've got state routes, county roads, and then we took our residential streets and we split them into two different categories. We looked through and determined a high volume residential category, which would be more a cut through road that connects to other streets like Chartley or Dorchester that connects, Chartley or Dorchester connects from Som over to Cedar. Chartley comes from Dorchester over to Gates Mills Boulevard. So that's the kind of street that we have in the high volume residential category. Low volume residential are going to be more of our streets that are cul-de-sacs, short streets, ones that don't operate to feed a lot of other streets or operate as a cut through. And we did that. Chip and I talked about it. We did that because we're not sure the same priority should be attached to both categories in terms of designating dollars. We wanted you to have the opportunity to understand the difference between the two of them. There's a distinct difference in the condition of them. And if we were to just jump into the program and say, we're going to attack the lowest pavement condition index streets first, we would end up doing a bunch of cul-de-sac streets. And that may not be the way that the strategy that we want to employ. We may want to do some of those higher volume streets in conjunction with attacking lower volume streets with some appropriate dollars attached to each category, depending on how we want to go about it. So we want to make sure you have the ability to understand the difference between the two. And then over on the right-hand side, what I've done.
Where's Gates Mills Boulevard?
Gates Mills Boulevard is County Road. Yeah. So.
Just that question. Try to frame this by looking at the different roads. Then you're going to drive some of those roads. And you're going to say, oh, okay, I was just looking here just a few minutes ago at Sugar River Road. Done by state. In the life of road, drive, and the PCI is like in the 60 to 70, 50 range. So
That's the portion that is south of Old Mill, which is a county road. The portion of Schooner River Road that is north of Old Mill is a state route. And that.
I'm just trying to relate. You see these numbers, but then as you drive a road, you'll get a flavor for what a PCI actually. You can show some videos here.
Yeah.
What I'm struggling with, Chip, is what is the right goal? I mean, obviously, the more you spend, the higher you can get your overall number on road condition. Why is 70 the right answer? How obviously there's some trade-off going on between spending more and what's reasonable.
At
and
this
what we-
point in time, 70 is a number. Council ultimately has the ability to say, look, we believe 62 is fine. We don't need to do anything. That's a decision that could be made. We want to maintain it at 62. We could pick 65, could be 68. 70 seems to be a pretty widely accepted target that when people enter into this type of an analysis, that's kind of our big, hairy, audacious goal that we want to get the overall average to 70. And ultimately, you're right, Mike. It is a matter of how many dollars do you want to spend? What's the expectation as far as what the program is going to do as far as elevating the PCI? What are we working towards? So we want to have that goal out there that we're going to work to. And ultimately, that's your all's decision. This provides a lot of great data in order to make that decision. I think, now we're saying, okay, we have a target as opposed to maintain the roads in the best condition possible. It's pretty generic type statement. Yeah. And now with each year, what we'll have the ability to do is, okay, our overall average PCI is 62. We're going to have a 2022 road program. Once that 2022 road program is done, I can rerun the numbers and show how that PCI is going to change as a result of that road program. Certainly, the more money you spend and the faster that you spend it in terms of PCI improvement, the more dollars makes it look like this. We could pick a goal of 100. Is that reasonable? Probably not. We could pick a goal of 52. We're going to let things deteriorate. That's not reasonable either. Somewhere in the middle is probably where we want to be. And the more money we spend, the faster we get to the goal. And over the length of time that we spend it, it will determine how quickly we get there.
So Mike, to your point, it's a struggle we have all the time with the roads, but hopefully this is going to give us the information to make a better decision about that.
I like the idea of having a goal.
Yeah.
I think it's a great idea. I just don't know. What I figured Chris was going to tell us is that we're at 62 and everybody's better. And that's one of the reasons we should have a goal that's higher than 62. But he didn't say that. I think he said we're not dissimilar to other neighborhoods as far as you know.
Well, nobody immediately in this area has done this analysis. I can tell you, I'm going to be doing it in Richmond Heights. I've got legislation on the agenda tonight to award a pavement management group contract in Richmond Heights. I can tell you Richmond Heights is probably going to be down around 50. They have underspent on their roadways for the last 12 years, incredibly underspent on it because they didn't have any money. But we're not Richmond Heights. So it's also a matter of what the expectation is on the behalf of council and the villagers. What do the villagers expect? Do they expect an average pavement condition index of 62, or do they expect something higher than that? Yeah.
That's right.
So
In the comprehensive plan too, we should hear a little, there are some questions in there about roads, so we should see how many complaints there are.
And Michael, I 100% agree with you. I don't know if 70 is going to be good. I can tell you that 62, even regardless of what Chris is saying, there's a bunch of roads that are pretty bad.
that's a completely
And
accurate.
so
that is totally
we're going to sit
accurate.
here saying, oh, we're not too bad. And if we just do this and this, we'll creep up. Meanwhile, we've got a bunch of roads. So I look at this that somehow I don't know. And yet we're going to see some numbers that say, whoa, we're going to have to spend a lot more money than we're currently thinking about. So it'd be an interesting dynamic, and it's going to probably be a bit of a judgment feel that one of the reasons tonight is just to educate us as much as we can.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to serve up on a platter and say, here it is, and everybody say, oh, great, and we walk away. I think we got to all form our own subjective judgment of what feels right.
I think you're right.
Yeah, so 10,000 foot level pavement deterioration is not linear. As a pavement condition decreases, it decreases more rapidly. Yeah. So, and it becomes more expensive to rehabilitate a road later in its life than it is to try to maintain it earlier in its life. So we're talking about intelligent spend of money in order to extend pavement life so that we can minimize expenditures in the future. Along with, and I completely agree with Chip, and over here on the right is beginning to establish the need where we're looking at all the roads that are under a pavement condition index of 50. They're broken out by high volume and low volume road. And it shows breakpoints of 0 to 20, 20 to 29, 30 to 39, 40 to 49. And it shows the amount of pavement area that we have that falls into each category. All of those pavements in that total area of pavement are pavements that need to be rehabilitated or reconstructed. And the longer we let those go, the more expensive it will be to repair them in the future.
Chris, quick question. So state routes are paid for by the state. So
This
Hayfield, there's no,
typical cost sharing on a state route is 80-20, 80% state, 20% local. If there's an effort that can be shown on the local municipality's part that they've taken efforts to maintain that road since the last time it was resurfaced, the state can reduce that contribution to 10%. We can, on occasion, like we did on SOM, get the state to pick up all of it because we're a village. It depends on, so that's, I was touching on how state routes and county roads kind of follow a different program. That's kind of, state routes are a different animal.
counties are called 50.
Yeah, county roads, we get the maintenance dollars every year that they reimburse us for material, for maintenance type efforts to reconstruct them. The county has a 50-50 program where we apply for the county to pay for 50% of the construction. And then we're ranked countywide with all those applications. And then if we are successful in obtaining the funding, then the village prepares the plans, the county pays for 50% of the construction.
Okay. And then I guess maybe the way I'm thinking of this in my mind is this something that's in your opinion, maybe this is something that council will end up addressing. Is this a one-time assessment to get the roads to really, hey, what's the number? And we think this gets the roads to where they should be and we're basically all right for the next 20 years. Or, hey, really, this has been some deferred maintenance, other issues. We've been spending X, probably need to be spending Y over the last X number of years. And really, this is a longer term issue where we need to spend an additional X every year, 15, 20 years out in the future and continuing to continue to maintain the roads? Or is this more of a one-time project to get some of these significant roads that have failed, particularly low volume residential roads and some of the other ones up to where they would need to be? And then that's maintenance there on out.
Those are exactly the critical
We
questions.
parked that
Greg.
question.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I don't know that we're going to answer it, but I think there'll be a little more data in here that'll help frame that dilemma.
Yeah, the city of Kirtland, we have developed a overall road rebuilding program for them. They didn't do pavement management group, but it was more of the feet on the ground approach to doing the pavement condition ratings out there. But there's a $16 million 10-year program that they're presenting to the voters that is almost like about 16 million total over 10 years.
And that's basically what my question is.
Yeah. So here are some roadway condition samples that I'll show you too. The first one is a condition sample of an excellent pavement. So this is a roadway that we just redid last year. And don't mind, there's some plow scrapes and some rust on the road, but you'll see that the pavement integrity is pretty good.
This is Fox Hill.
It is. So those brown lines on there are just from the plow riding on the asphalt, but you get a feeling for, there's no real cracking on the edge. The pavement's pretty consistent condition. It's got a PCI above 90, so it would fall into the excellent category. So here, we'd be looking at this year as a part of what we're doing, going in and doing a Reclamite application, which helps to rejuvenate the asphalt, gives it back the things that are driven off when the asphalt is heated. And it helps to keep the surface pliable and helps to extend the life of the pavement. That product goes down for like $1 a square yard, right? And it can extend the life of the pavement. If you do it every few years, you can buy 10 years at the end of the pavement life. So here's an example of a good pavement. This is going to be Chagrin River Road north of Old Mill. This is the part that was redone by the state a few years ago. So you see, we're starting to get some cracking. And he's not driving down the middle of the road. The camera hangs out.
You'll see him swerve into it.
Yeah, first time I watched these videos, I had my heart in my throat.
Yeah.
You see some cracking along the center line. That's where there's a construction joint where the two asphalts butt up against each other in the middle of the road. You're going to see some cracking, which is an identification. Okay, we got to get here and start crack filling because we want to fill those cracks, stop the water from migrating down into the road. Reclamite is I've got a picture showing the application. It's a liquid that's sprayed on the surface. So, but I've got a picture that shows the applicator truck of it. Here's a fair pavement. This is, yes, it is. Nice work, Karen Lane. That trench is a repair we made when we did the storm sewer work and regraded the cul-de-sac a couple years ago to fix a drainage problem. So this part of the cul-de-sac is in pretty decent shape because we just did some repaving. But the rest of the road, you can see there's that edge cracking I was talking about. That's going to be pretty predominant along the edge of the road. That's pretty indicative of a base problem. So that's where you would get your load-based failure.
So what, just to pause, what would we do on this road to maintain, to prevent it from falling off the edge of the earth?
So it falls into a good category. So what I would suggest in these instances would be a good candidate, not for a full reconstruction or a full rehabilitation, but this is where we would come in and do a full depth repair along the edge of the road in order to better support the asphalt on top, and then take off and put back 2 inches. That mill and fill of the surface is considered a maintenance activity. So it'd be a good candidate for
So could you go back to that?
full depth repairs and along the edge, and then a mill and fill on the surface.
Maybe as you get to a section, pause where you would,
Mhm.
that be one or? Because
Yeah, it's hard to pause the video, so.
Okay,
But yeah, so those areas we see all the cracking along the edge of the road, essentially they'd come in with either a mill or a backhoe. They do a saw cut and they'd remove 8 to 12 inches deep. We'd put back in stone and asphalt along the edge of the road where those areas are failed. So we stabilize that base. And then because we've got this general surface cracking that's more environmental, as you get to the middle of the road, we would take off that wearing course 2 inch thick and put back 2 inches on top of it. So those are the,
what I was trying to point on this road is you can see an awful lot of the road is fine. So it gets to per square yard on this one, $50,000 may cover all the issues on Karen Lane, because you're just going to take individual sections and do what he's talking about. You don't have to dig up the whole road.
right, it would be full depth and full depth repairs and then a mill and fill overlay on it, as opposed to a full rehabilitation or full reconstruction. These are some samples of roadways that are in poor condition. You can see Cardinal, Dorchester, Hill Creek, and West Hill. Let's do Cardinal Lane first. First part of it's in pretty good shape, but once you get to this joint right here, it's in terrible shape. So you can see you get a lot more cracking along the edge of the road. The reason that all that cracking is occurring is called alligator cracking. You can understand why by looking at it. Losing the road edge, and then as the road start to lose the road edge, the pavement starts to creep and it starts to crack. Asphalt's flexible, but over time, with exposure to the elements, it becomes brittle. And
But here's the challenge. There's what, 8 houses on Cardinal Lane?
so low volume residential. That's an example of a low volume residential road.
Dorchester, there's probably
Dorchester.
30 houses, 40
Right.
houses.
So this is if you recall, we repaved the portion from Chartley to Cedar last year. We did a 2 inch mill and fill on it. So this is the portion that is between Somme and Chartley.
Okay, so that one's probably 20 houses, I don't know. Well, 19 plus the lake. So
So you get a lot more cracking, edge failures,
Oh, yes.
and it's all based on percentage of area of failed pavement that's been analyzed by the AI after the video. And you can see there's some areas that are better than others, but this would be a good candidate. Even though it's in the poor category, I've been out there and looked at it. There's a lot of surface cracking on the pavement, but there's not a lot of load-based failures, so we don't have a lot of full depth repairs to do. So in this instance, we could come in and do some very limited full depth repairs and then probably do a 2-inch mill and fill on it and buy ourselves quite a bit of time before we have to do a full reconstruction on it. And then Hill Creek, a portion of Hill Creek, so you get an example of how Hill Creek looks. A lot of joints that are cracking. You can see some old repairs that are there. That's the darker sections of asphalt where we've come in and maybe removed. We've done some limited milling and filling in order to take out the worst areas.
So, Michael, I see that, and it's, from an engineering or structural standpoint, oh, yeah, well, we got to work on it. But in driving that road, it's not like you're hitting huge potholes or anything. So it's just that's where I struggle with, I certainly don't want all the roads in the village to be a rating of 40, but I wouldn't call that the worst thing I've ever seen either. So I don't feel like it's an emergency that I don't know. I mean, that doesn't look so good.
Yeah, right. There's areas of it that are in terrible shape.
Right.
So Chris, what's the average road that, I think about what Hunting Valley and Russell did.
Mhm.
And their records went back to the early 80s. They couldn't find any point when that road was ever touched. And so, I think about Hill Creek and West Hill, all those developments were put in the early 90s. Obviously, that's all original roadway. So listen, the average road is 40 years, you got to dig it up and start over.
Yeah, I mean, average road life typically is going to be around 30 years. Well, I'm going to say it's going to be somewhere between 20 and 35 years, depending on how aggressively you maintain it.
Hill Creek was part of the water program.
Yeah, so I mean, many of these roads have been resurfaced, so they may have gone in at that point in time, Craig, but they've been resurfaced since then, either as a part of a roadway project or as a part of the water line project.
Roadway failing, how many times can you go in and mill and fill a road before it's completely shot and we got to rip it all out and start over?
Right, I mean, that.
You can get away doing that once or twice, or?
It depends on the type of failures that you have. If you're getting more environmental based failures that are top down, you could probably do that for almost an indefinite amount of time, as long as you've got a solid base underneath the road. If you've got a road that's got a lot of base problems, you're better off going in and recycling it, stabilizing the base, and then putting a new surface over the top of it. Yeah,
So Chris, one of your possible suggestions for us to be mulling over between now and our council meeting in 2 weeks is Dorchester. Now, would we do all of Dorchester or some specific sections, or what? When you lay out a big chunk of money for Dorchester, what are we getting for that?
So I've got two thoughts on Dorchester. One is to do what we did last year on the portion that remains, which would be to do full depth repairs and then do a 2-inch mill and fill on that portion of the road. Or there is a process, because I'm looking at alternative methods for trying to buy time to maintain roads, because asphalt prices are through the roof. We just took bids in Kirtland for the road program for this year. Last year, asphalt was $80 a ton. This year, bids are coming in between $130 and $160 a ton. So is there something that we could do that would allow us to redo the surface without having to spend a ton of money on asphalt? And there's a process that is out there that's an asphalt surface recycling, as opposed to recycling the bottom of the road and then putting new asphalt on the top of it. There's a process where you can heat and peel off the top 3 inches, mix it with new asphalt material, liquid asphalt, and then roll it back down like a new surface. And if we were to do full depth repairs, limit the amount of asphalt we have to buy to the full depth repairs, and then recycle the surface, it could, a road like Chartley would be $350,000 to fully reconstruct it. If we go in and do a series of full depth repairs and then recycle the surface in an effort to try to extend the life out before we've got to talking about reconstructing it, we could probably save a couple $100,000. The process has been used historically. They've got some new equipment, which makes it a little more friendly. It's because it's heat based. They now have radiant heaters as opposed to big open flames that would light everything on fire adjacent to the roadway. But just an example.
So Chris, when we go out for road material, are vendors going to come back with those options?
I'll give them that option. The way that we've got it set up is we've got the road program set up so that we have streets in separate sections using different methods. And then we've got the ability to award those sections independent of one another. So there'll be an option for resurfacing Road X, for doing a surface recycling on Road X. And then we can look at how the pricing comes in, balance how those look compared to what we want to accomplish, and then make an award based on what we think the best thing to do is. They're supposed to be using that method on, I think, 5 or 6 different streets down at Richfield the next couple of weeks. So I'll be down there watching that very closely.
Good, thank you.
Here's some examples of failed pavements. So we've got Blackberry Lane, which is up on a county line, north end of the village. This is one of the worst roads we have in the village. I think the PCI is down around 14. But it's cul-de-sac street, services about a dozen homes. And you can see that, it just got cracking all the way across the road, a lot of edge failures. So you can see why the PCI would be very low.
It's interesting. Karen forwarded an email from a resident on Blackberry that talked about, when are we going to address the road? And I first sent him one and said, we're working on it. And then he followed up a month later and just said, getting closer. And I said, we're working on it and we're very aware of the condition of Blackberry. And he emailed me back and said, I was actually talking about County Line. So apparently he's fine with Blackberry. He was focused on County Line, which comes out on. So yeah, probably.
It is interesting how people perceive it.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, in Hunting Valley for a long time, I was an engineer out there, and there was always a big debate about County Line Road. And, there was a number of people who lived on County Line that wanted it to be basically a falling apart gravel road because that's the look and feel they wanted, and it slowed traffic down, and yeah. So it just other examples of, failed pavements. I think you guys get a pretty good idea what a failed pavement looks like as compared to a good pavement. So.
Well, that's really bad. Now show Chartley, because that may be on our list
Yeah.
to debate here soon. And again, guys, the dilemma is Blackberry is a cul-de-sac. There's X number of homes. Chartley is a pass-through road. Independent of the fact that the mayor lives on Chartley is,
You get school traffic and immense amount of school traffic.
Mhm.
It's unbelievable.
So you get a good feeling for what the failed pavements look like when I get into some of the meat of what's going on. Okay, so if we talk about the pavement life curve, if you look at this particular graph, a pavement life curve, when it's newly installed, it's up here, it's in great shape. Over time, with no intervention and nothing being done, it will decrease in quality, and you can see the line gets a little steeper as it gets older in its life, showing the more rapid deterioration. The black line up here would be if we come in and say do reclamite. We improve the PCI, we improve the condition, we pop that pavement life curve out a little bit, and then maybe at some point in time we come in and do a chip seal or do crack sealing and another dose of reclamite. So our goal is to get this point as far out in the future as we can. If we put a road in and do nothing, we'll be rebuilding it in less than 15 years, more than likely.
but we
If-
have a lot of streets in our village that we haven't done very much of anything to that are, they're not, in other words, they're older than 13 years.
I mean, we do crack sealing. We've been actively milling and filling. We do patching. So, I mean, there's been maintenance activities that are going on that are all life extending activities. So I've been pretty aggressive with reclamite over the last 10 or 12 years, especially, if you look, I think Gates Mills Boulevard is a terrific example. That road is nearly 15 years old now. And it is a good example of a fully reconstructed pavement. We did a recycling process. It went all the way down into the base and rebuilt the base of the road, put concrete curbs on it. took some of the old stone curbs and put in concrete curbs, so we restrain that edge. I'm not suggesting we do that on our streets. I'm just using that as an example. But then we've been very aggressive about crack sealing, Reclamite. I think it's had 3 or 4 applications of Reclamite since it went in. And the pavement's really in pretty good shape for 15 years old. You know, if we would have put it in and done nothing to it since then, we'd be in here talking about having to mill off 2 inches and put it back now.
Now, what does Reclamite actually do?
So Reclamite, when an asphalt mix design is prepared, in the process, the asphalt is heated. During that heating process, it drives off a lot of volatile chemicals that are in the asphalt that help to keep the asphalt flexible and pliable. The Reclamite gives that stuff back to the asphalt to help keep that surface soft, supple, non-cracking, helps to seal up cracks, helps to waterproof the surface of the pavement, and it makes it more durable. So what we do is we return the asphalt, if it's done at the right intervals and at the right time, we're taking the asphalt that's been subject to environmental weathering, and we've taken the environmental weathering almost out of the equation because we're returning it to its pliable, soft surface that it had when it went in originally. Another thing that happens is asphalt starts to weather, it becomes brittle, and all the sand, the fine material starts to pick out of the surface. So you see it start to look more pitted. That's when it starts weathering. When the Reclamite goes down, there's also a sprinkling of sand that goes over the top of it to help give those fines back to the asphalt surface. So it treats the surface and gives it back what it had when it was originally mixed.
So Chris, you talked about Gates Mills Boulevard, and it is a good road, and it gets a lot of traffic, but it does have curbs. How much do you think the curbing contributes? Because a lot of the examples you've given and what you've talked about is.
Yeah, especially,
roads
I mean,
seem
it almost eliminates the edge failures. But I'm not proposing that we start putting curbs on every
Right.
roads, because then you got to put in drainage systems, and you end up, instead of having a 2-lane asphalt road, you have a 2-lane asphalt road with curbs and a brand new drainage system, and you're spending 4 times the amount of money.
Okay.
So I'm not proposing that. I'm just saying that's a
Yeah.
good example of what a curb can do to support the edge of an asphalt pavement. So from a pavement maintenance standpoint, our goal always is to delay that major rehabilitation as long as possible, like changing your oil in the car. Change your oil, your engine lasts. If you buy a car and you just drive it until it dies, and spend no money on maintenance, that's a directly relatable example. Money that we spend early on in the maintenance process, Reclamite, crack seal, surface treatments, in order to make that pavement as weatherproof, watertight, crack-free as we can, is going to buy us a lot of time at the end of the road and are relatively inexpensive compared to other maintenance methods that have to be spent later on in the pavement life. And those methods that are used later on, because the pavement has started to deteriorate, they typically are more expensive and they don't last nearly as long. So at the bottom, you can see it gives an example of when the different pavement maintenance methods are employed in a pavement life. So early on, we've got Reclamite, fog seal, which is similar to Reclamite, kind of like a high-tech crack seal. Then we get into more of our chip seal and surface seal, slurry seal. Slurry seal is just a mixture of liquid asphalt, sand, and it gets put on in a real thin layer. Cape seal is a chip seal covered with a slurry seal. Then we get down into the more expensive methods with milling and filling and having to do full reconstruction. So the best money spent is the money spent early on. And
Can you go back just a second? So one of the questions I've asked Chris is, we have a road that's currently 80 PCI. So it's probably not going to be on our priority list in the near term. So it sits in this schedule. Well, and we come up with a 5-year plan. We take a road that's a 20 PCI and we reconstruct it. And so let's hope that we did a good job and it's up to 90. Well, what happened to that road that was 80 over these next 5 years? Does it go to 79 or does it go to 70 or does it go to 50? And that, this chart is indicative that it's obviously going to go down a bit, but I don't know that you still have to do some research with these guys on how fast, and of course, it depends on the
It
environment.
depends on the road and the environment, right? Like a road like Gates Mills Boulevard in area, the portion of it that is closer to Som is likely going to weather slower than the portion that's closer to Old Mill. Portion closer to Old Mill is in a lot of shade. It stays damp a lot of time, different environmental conditions. Riverview that we just did last year is fully shaded. The back portion of that road was by far the worst as a direct result of the environmental conditions and the shade and the fact that it's always damp back there. Water, pavements and water do not go together very well. So what are the maintenance methods that we employ? And we've talked around this. So, at PCI 90 and above, we're really looking at life extending, cheap maintenance methods, reclamite and crack seal. PCI between 50 and 89, the middling type roads, we can just still do reclamite and crack seal, trying to extend their life. We get more involved at this point with hot spots where we've got to go out and mill out and replace either partial or full depth areas that are in bad shape that we select. So we may do one lane over a 20 or 30 foot length and kind of leapfrog around, which we've been doing a lot of recently, or potentially removing and replacing the entire surface, either through a 2-inch mill and fill or an asphalt surface recycling. And you can see the difference in those two methods right there. That asphalt surface recycling is more $15 square yard. The 2-inch mill and fill is more like $50 a square yard, and on the increase with the change in price of asphalt. Below 50 PCI is our poor and failed roads, where we really have to do a full depth recycling and overlay, which would be about $60 a square yard or $455,000 a lane mile, or complete removal and replacement, where we've got to tear out the old road, start from the dirt, make sure the dirt's in good shape, proof roll it, where we run a fully loaded dump truck off over it, fix any soft spots, start with the stone, then all the way up with the asphalt. Much more expensive, complete road rebuild at that point.
Chris, do you have a feel for numbers of the numbers? It just seems astronomical. Is that strictly driven off of cost of materials, or is that 90% material, 10% labor in terms of bringing in a firm to do that kind of work? What the breakdown looks like?
The material and labor typically runs, for this type of work, it's usually about 50-50, maybe 60-40 slanted towards the material.
And those numbers you just showed, you've updated for what you think is close to the
Yeah.
current asphalt cost.
Correct.
And remember that oil is a big driver for asphalt cost.
Correct.
So, just look at the cost of a barrel of oil and we all know what's happening at the gas pump. So I don't know if it's an unusual time or this is indicative of where oil will always be, but we're talking to some people that probably know that better than most people in the world. So, well, there you go.
So where do we stand at this moment? So if we look at a pavement management strategy that's going to elevate our PCI to 70, where does each one of the categories that we have stand right now? So as I mentioned before, with the completion of the ODOT project on SOM, our state route average PCI is going to be 70 or 71, which is, that's terrific. I think that puts us in a real good spot. County roads, we're currently at 67. So I've talked to the county about a potential project for next year where they would pay for 50% of the asphalt surface recycling, the peel off 3 inches, heat it, mix it. They would pay for 50% of that under the county maintenance program, where we would be able to redo the top 3 inches of Chagrin River Road south of Old Mill all the way down to Hunting Valley. The cost of the project would be probably about $240,000, and we could likely get the county to pick up half of that. That would be done as a time buying exercise because we have a larger project that's needed on Chagrin River Road where we need to fix a number of areas that we've got some tight curves and some sight distance problems and a number of things. And we're submitting that project for funding to the county and to the state through our Public Works Commission, trying to get additional funding because that project is more like 1.75 million. So instead of spending money on continuing to just patch areas, we can redo the whole surface, get half of it paid for by the county, have a terrific road for the meantime while we get our funding in place for the larger project. So just an approach for that road. From a high volume residential standpoint, we're currently at 63 and subject to discussions and consideration this evening. Same with low volume residential roads, cul-de-sac streets, short roads. That currently stands at 54, certainly the category that seems to be in most need at this point in time. So how does the programming of rebuilding state and county road differ from local street program? I kind of touched on that. State roads, typically, we're going to be working with ODOT. They have a program resurfacing project. They have most of the roads that are on a revolving maintenance schedule where they're going to resurface them every so often. We can stick our nose in that tent every so often, wave our hand like we did with SOM and say, hey, SOM's getting to the point where it really needs to be done. Occasionally we can get that moved up on the schedule, but our state routes are really in pretty good shape with the work that we've had done in the last 10 years on Screen River Road, Mayfield Road, and now SOM. So county roads, typically we can go out to the county itself for the 50/50 program. We can apply and try to get on with NOACA on the Transportation Improvement Program, try to secure federal money for that. Also look for Ohio Public Works Commission or issue 2 money, issue 1 money. In the state of Ohio, all funding applications that are due each year for grant, zero interest loan, other funding types. I'm always on the hunt for other people's money in terms of trying to do what we can on our state and county roads and any projects we have in the village. So they fall into a different animal and they become separate projects that are really apart from our annual road program, those state and county road jobs. So what does the annual road program look like? One would be a section where we have our county road maintenance. And that's typically, we get about 50% of the money back from the county because they reimburse us for 100% of material that we use. Reclamite and crack sealing on good to high PCI roads. So that's going to be PCI above 70, where we're really investing low dollars to extend that life curve as much as we can. We get in a third category where we're getting into kind of our middling roads where we're going to be doing spot mill and fill and full depth repairs in order to address hot spots that we have a bad area just here or there on the road, but the rest of the road may be in pretty decent shape. Complete surface removal and replacement or surface recycling, where we've got our roads that are between 41 and 69, depending on the type of failures that we have. And then the last category would be rehabilitation, reconstruction of the low PCI roads, where we're under 40 or under 50. And then I've got a chart that expands on that category on the next pavement. So this is really this is the big number here. So the first half of this chart looks a lot like, or it is the same chart that you saw on the previous page, but now I've extended that out so that we calculate what the dollar value is of the either rehabilitation or reconstruction is that would be needed in order to fix those roads, because they're either failed or poor, and they need to be either recycled and overlaid or fully reconstructed. And you can see down at the bottom, what I did is for each I broke it up into high volume, low volume roads by each PCI category from low to high up to 50, which is all the ones that fall into the category that we need of reconstruction or rehabilitation. Estimated the cost based on the number of square yards that we have, and then established a cumulative total that we have within in order to establish that. So our big number for reconstructing or rehabilitating all the roads with under PCI of 50 is just over $7 million. So if we're going to look at all those roads that were black and yellow on that map to redo them over some period of time, if that's this choice, we'd have to spend about $7 million to do that.
So if you look at this for just a second and go back to that middle column called estimated cost, you see that the high volume roads is actually $1.2 million, 533 plus 666. So of that 7 million cumulative, $1.2 million is high volume roads, and they're somewhere between a PCI of 20 and 39. And then the other 5.8 million is your low volume, all the way, the 846,000 is 0 to 19. You saw a video of that, which is Blackberry, on up to 40 to 49. We could look at an example, but so you look at this at first and you say, oh, well, yeah, I mean, do we really want to wait 10 years? So now you go to that guy in Blackberry. luckily he's concerned about County Line, not Blackberry, because I may be telling him we're gonna get to it in year 8, and if you saw the video, and I'm serious, what if that guy walked in tonight and said, hey, where's Blackberry? Oh, well, we just figured out we're gonna do that in 2029. I mean, that's pretty tough to think that. You saw the condition of that road. And yet that's a lot of money.
Yeah, and we do get to the point where you've got a PCI that falls below a certain level, like below 40, where it doesn't make any sense to spend any money maintaining the road anymore. If it's going to be scheduled for reconstruction.
What do we spend a year now on roads, and this number is in addition to that number?
So,
This year's 600,000 total.
This is plus in addition.
yep, so that number,
Not
what we're
close.
talking about right there is just this section 5. So I've got a sample road program on the next couple slides. So there, if we split that $7 million over a 5-year road program, you can see it's about $1.4 million a year. If we do it over 10, it's about $704,000 a year. So that would be just one part of the road program. So if we look at what these, by the way, these column headings are reversed. I apologize for that. But if we look at what that same 5-section road program would look like, given a commitment to a rehab or reconstruction of those roads under a 5-year or 10-year program, in addition to the other work that we need to do in the other 4 sections, this is what we're looking at on an annual basis. So this would be for a 10-year program up here. This is the 5-year program. So under a 5-year program, over here, what we would have is about $1.8 million a year to invest in county road maintenance at, I've got a low and high range because we have to apply for the county funds every year and then they award it. And typically it varies. They don't always give us everything we ask for. Reclamite and crack seal, typically we're going to look at treating all the roads we did the year previous that got a new asphalt surface on them, along with picking out select streets that would be scheduled for reclamite on a revolving basis of hopefully at least every 5 years for the roads that are still in relatively good shape. We've got partial and full depth in hotspots. So that would be, resident on a street calls and says, I've got the road in front of my house. It's in terrible shape. So that's where we kind of leapfrog around and hit the bad spots just in select areas, whether they be full depth or partial depth repairs. We've got complete mill and fill or full depth recycling. So that would be where we're going in and just addressing the surface on a particular road in an effort to extend that pavement life before we have to reconstruct it out as far as we can. And then the commitment to attacking the poor and failed pavements under a program that would lines up with the previous chart where we've got the $700 to $1.4 million a year that's committed to the reconstruction or rehabilitation of the lowest PCI roads below 50.
Now, Michael, think about, let's go back to that. So what would be ideal in a mathematical model is to say, if we spend this, then our PCI in the low roads is going to go from here to this. The roads that we're doing reclamite is going to hold and deteriorate very slightly. And so, blah, 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 and the rest. And so mathematically, our PCI is going to go from here to here over the next 5 or 10 years. There's going to be a real art to doing that, but we've got the data. I mean, we've got every road, every PCI, and you can start to do that. And that's, we've got a lot more work to do.
Yeah.
This is to kind of frame this so you can get a flavor for these are staggering numbers, guys. I mean, we got to go out for, a big tax increase if we wanted to do $1.9 million a year on all this. Now, interesting in that column, we're going to want to do 200,000 of county road maintenance every year because we get 100,000 back. So the one misnomer on this chart is that it's actually 100,000. It's just the problem is that we spend 200 and the next year we get 100 back. But every year we're doing that. So, and I'm working with Janet to try to create one more line item on our monthly income statement that would break that, it just shows up under other income when that money comes in. Right. And so in the past, it's just sitting there under other income when it Because when it comes in a separate year, you can't put it against the capital. That's.
Got it.
That's government accounting. You can't put it against a,
Well, everybody
yep,
pays the general fund anyway.
okay,
You
yeah.
can transfer it to the capital. Pay it out of there.
It's just for tracking. That's all. I'm not worried about where you have to put it. I just like to break it out so we can do a net of what our road program is. But, so that's the point. You're gonna start with the 100,000 in that line item for the foreseeable future, as long as they're doing that.
Yeah.
But, and I don't know, I'm not sitting here tonight thinking, well, boy, we gotta figure out how to spend $1.8 million a year. We're just giving you a framework for the magnitude. But 935, I'm telling you, it's probably closer to what we're gonna want to be thinking about. Now, that's
Yeah, I
at
would
pretty
agree.
high asphalt prices, and I don't,
I mean, and ultimately, you know, the asphalt prices will drive, you know, I have to imagine eventually they're gonna come back down, at least I hope they do. But ultimately, the cost of material at any point in time in the future is gonna drive the amount of work we're gonna be able to do.
What's that $900,000 number been annually, actually?
Closer to
600, about 600, 500 to 600. No, wait, no, I bet it's been 500 to 600. We bumped it on our long range plan, we bumped it up to about 700,
Yeah.
650 to 700,
Yeah,
because
a little higher.
in the capital plan, you have culverts. Separate, obviously, from anything we're talking about here. And culverts are very lumpy. You can have a breakdown in a culvert and it could be $100,000, or you can do very little. So we've tried to do a 5-year average, and it's about 100, and then you have some miscellaneous stuff. So 100 to 150 is, so this number, we'd be another 100 to 150. The roads program for this year is 630.
Yeah, if you remember from a planning standpoint, when we talked with the roads committee, I think we settled in on a number somewhere around $600,000. And then the suggestion was maybe every third or fourth year, we increase that by 50% so that we can have the ability to pick up a whole road or two every few years. So again, that's based on budget addressing the need. So, you know, we were at 600, 600, 900, 600, 600, 900 with some ability to manipulate that around. And David, you asked a question about reclamite. This is reclamite being applied right here. So it goes down pink. It takes about 15 minutes before it breaks and it starts to soak into the asphalt. So they spray it down. They come by with a spreader truck and put the sand on top of it. That sits, traffic beats the sand in over the course of a couple days, and then they come back and sweep the road. Looks a little, it can be a little tacky for, it tracks a little bit, but it's remarkable in terms of how effective it is for $1 a square yard.
So Chris, this is kind of what you were talking about at the beginning of changing, and you said it a minute ago, that the changing the philosophical approach from the budget driving the work to the need driving the budget.
Yes.
And
Yes.
is this something, again, that you could project? This is for a year. I mean, we have this information, this tool for, for a year. But again, how far out could you, if we changed it to, let's say this budget, the need is driving the budget, what you just put up there, for how long, how many years would
So,
that be?
My suggestion would be is that we determine what that first slug of work is going to be. So let's just say 5 years. You know, we determine a specific number of roads we're going to do, what our approach is going to, I need to know what the plan of attack is and what the budget is going to be.
Mhm.
And then based on those parameters, I can run some analyses showing what impact that's going to have over that period of time. So in a perfect world, council says, okay, we're going to commit to $950,000 a year for the next 5 years. And we want to address the low PCI roads, starting with a 75% allocation to the high volume residential roads and a 25% allocation to the low volume residential roads. I can then do my thing and I can run a number of analyses showing what I would anticipate the impact of the overall pavement condition index is going to be. And then after that 5-year interval of doing those projects and getting that work done, we'd have the pavement management group come back in,
Mhm.
redo the whole village. We then pick up all the work we've completed over the last 5 years, see if I'm telling the truth or not. And then also it gives us good information on how the other roads are deteriorating. So that it gives me the ability to build more of a predictive model on how our roads deteriorate over time, which is not necessarily an apple to an apple to an apple. Different roads, different locations are all going to deteriorate at a different rate. Environmental conditions, it may be different thicknesses. Some may be asphalt laid over garbage, because it's a road that's been around forever, that started off as a little horse trail. Or it may be something like Mayfield Road, which is a state route that is going to be far different, but, just for an example standpoint. So, I mean, really the big questions.
And by the way, I think our current thinking is that we will probably do a new assessment in 2 years. Or, I mean, we did this assessment in early 2022. You think we'll have PCI, Pavement Management Group, come back in 2024 or 2025?
I think I would answer that question with, it depends what we're going to do over the next 3 years. So depending on what dollar amount and projects that we commit to, my suggestion for when Pavement Management Group would come back would be based on picking the best spot so that we get the best bang for our buck. We don't want to do a program where we say, okay, we just want to buy as much time for right now until we really have to commit to this big number. So we're just going to do a bunch of patching. There's no sense having them come back in and do it at that point in time, because the pavement condition index is probably not going to change at all. So how aggressively, from an annual funding standpoint, do we want to implement projects to raise the PCI? That is a council question. How do we want to differentiate between high volume and low volume residential roads, and how do we want to fund those? Are they the same? Do we just start with the worst road and work our way through regardless of high volume or low volume, knowing that would probably do a bunch of low volume roads first before we would get to the higher volume roads? Or do we want to have some allocation that goes to each category in acknowledgement of the fact that there's more residents that are served, there's more traffic that likely travels on those roads, and they're going to deteriorate more quickly than the lower volume roads. So we might as well spend the money now before they get so bad we have to spend more money on them. And then also the typical funding split that we want to have on an annual basis for our different categories that were shown on the typical road program. For our preventative maintenance, so that's the reclamite and the crack seal. The maintenance, which is the middling roads, which is going to be reclamite, crack seal, patching, 2-inch mill and fill on the surface. And then for the amount of money that's going to be allocated for rehabilitation or reconstruction on a typical annual road program. So kind of 3 alternatives Chip wanted to wrap up with is the way that we might approach the 2022 road program. And again, the contract is developed so that it will have the ability to select options in different sections for award.
Can you
But
pause just a second?
sure.
So up till this point, this has been an overview of the complexity and magnitude of what we've got to wrestle with really to define a 5-year program. We just got this data. Chris had to get it updated to take out some roads that weren't really part of this. So now we've got to, in 2 weeks, or when we get the bid back, I guess, or begin to frame out what we want to do this year. After that, later this year, we're going to try to work on the 5-year for the long range plan. So we're kind of in between. You've just digested a whole lot. My take from this is we might want to think about spending a little more this year than we budgeted. Remember, we budgeted 600,000. This isn't what you see in 2 weeks. We're going to refine and come back maybe with 2 or 3 options. Chris is giving a wide variation here to try to get a sense from us tonight for a little bit of guidance. And then we'll come back with a little bit more specific. So you can see, anyways, so that was, this isn't, we're just trying to begin to frame. So you got a sense when we come back in 2 weeks. We're not going to have all the answers. I'm not going to have a clue what the PCI is going to do based on what we approve at this point. So
So this would be kind of three different approaches to the 2022 road program, depending on how you want to approach it. The first one would be to jump in both feet and begin the process of rehabilitating the low pavement condition index streets, starting with the worst roads and working our way forward. So if we're going to do that, we would pick out two low volume residential streets, which would be Blackberry and Chestnut, which are the two lowest rated streets in the village. In conjunction with that, that would just be from the reconstruction rehabilitation standpoint. We have our standard annual categories that we would still have. With the county road work, we have $115,000 commitment from the county for reimbursement of material. So the total spend would be $230,000, of which we get $115,000 back. Reclamite and crack seal, I've got $56,000, and that would treat all the roads that we repaved last year. And do crack seal at a number of other locations as well, so that we get them started on the right foot. Spot mill and fill of hot spots, we got any number of those. We got water line repairs on Mayfield Road. We've got some other areas around town that all need to be addressed. So that would be our partial depth, full depth type repairs in areas of select bad pavement. We wouldn't have any commitment to surface recycling or complete milling filling for this year, but we would rehab two of the lowest PCI roads in the village with Blackberry and Chestnut at a cost of $450,000. The total for that would be about $811,000.
Let me pause on a budget nuance for this year. We budgeted 600 and some thousand for roads, 620, I think.
635.
635, okay, thank you. But we did not budget, I don't think, Janet, I don't think we budgeted for the reimbursement from last year.
Which I think is $106,000.
I don't think, did we put that in other income?
Is that for the county roads?
It is in the other income? Oh, okay. Okay, so the 620 this year would be comparable to the 811. Okay, because for some reason, maybe in prior years, we hadn't done that. So if you think that's in the other income this year, then we did budget it. Okay, okay. Okay, sorry.
Okay. So alternate two would be address two of the worst high volume residential streets, which are Dorchester and Chartley, through either the full depth repairs and asphalt surface recycling, or more of a recycling and an overlay approach, in conjunction with the county. Consistent numbers for reclamite, spot mill and fill, but we do a complete mill and fill surface recycle type project on Dorchester and Chartley at a cost of about $350,000. And then we look at a limited reconstruction of Carpenter, primarily because it is in terrible shape. And it is the service department has a yard back on Chartley, or on Carpenter. So it takes a beating as a result of that. And it's, so it's an option. It's an approach. So it would improve access for a very limited number of residents. I think there's 3 homes on Carpenter, but it would help to protect the roadway from damage as a result of service department vehicles, and address one of the worst low volume residential roads with a benefit to the village. So again, an option. Lastly would be, okay, we're entering into this process of pavement condition index based analysis of the roads and developing the budget. For this year, we want to buy ourselves as much time as possible before we have to commit to a program. So we're going to go around the village and do as much spot repairs, full depth, partial depth spot repairs as we can, in an effort to buy ourselves some time as we have further discussions and make a decision on exactly how we're going to attack the roads and how the budget allocation is going to be. So in this instance, we wouldn't do anything with complete mill and fill or rehab and reconstruction of low PCI roads. We would focus all our activity on county roads, maintenance measures on the roads that we did last year, and crack sealing, and reclamite. And then we would do a whole bunch of spot milling and filling all throughout the village in an effort to try to address a bunch of hot spots and get things stabilized while we make other decisions. And So that's at about 786,000. So you can see, I tried to keep them relatively consistent. Any of these numbers, I mean, option 3, that's a number that is completely chosen by council. If you said, we only want to spend $250,000 and do that, I mean, that's what the number would be. So I've kept it about the $800,000 mark in all instances in an effort to try to just have it be comparative.
So one observation, of course, is that we are looking at a much steeper increase, I mean, a very high asphalt cost. And so do we want to roll the dice and say, well, maybe that'll come back down in a future year? So it'd be silly to do a whole lot. I mean, you're paying a lot of premium dollars, maybe. Chris, you have talked about this variation of recycling the asphalt and mixing it and whatever that you're going to go out and look at in Richfield when they do that. Is that embedded in any of these options?
That would be in this one right here.
So that's what we'd be doing there.
Yeah.
And what, for Dorchester and Chartley, if you did that, now here we go.
Mhm.
What do you think the PCI would be and how long would it last?
It's going to be very similar to a resurfacing project like we did. So we would go in and do full depth repairs along the edges in the bad areas, and then we would recycle the surface,
The
And
entire
the-
road?
the entire road, edge to edge over the entire road. And the PCI, once that's done, is going to be very near 100. It'll be almost like a brand new road. It won't behave like a brand new road over time. So I would expect in the next 2, we'll want to go in there and probably reclimate it next year. In a couple years, we'll probably have to initiate crack sealing. And I would expect the PCI to reduce down closer to 75 over the course of the next 10 years. Probably 10 years from now, it'll go from about 100 to 75.
Now, would it be crude to put down the number of homes we're impacting? I mean, you see the dilemma here.
Well, okay, I don't know. You've got low impact, high impact.
Well, we've got that last column there, Chip, where I added that just in case anybody wanted to see it over here. So you can see, again, that's for the high volume, low volume residential roads in each category of PCI. But you see by far, low volume roads with a PCI of 40 to 49 are really those two categories of big numbers. I mean, these are the two biggest numbers there. You look at the number of streets that are involved in each category, and then the number of homes that are on each street. It gives you a feel for it. It's really those the most residents are on the low volume PCI roads that are between 30 and 50.
What? Two questions.
Sure, go ahead. Yeah.
Chris, are you going to send us this slide deck?
Sure.
The numbers are a little fuzzy for me.
Okay.
And then the second question is about the council meeting in 2 weeks. Chip, what are you going to be asking of us at that meeting?
Well, you don't think we're going to get the bids back?
I don't think we'll have bids back by the next council meeting. It'll be either a special meeting that we can talk about at the next meeting, or it'll be the following meeting.
Call this 2022 program. Will these dollars be spent during 2022 in part or?
It would all be 2022.
Yeah. Once we let the bid, they'll, size everything up and they'll do the work. And at this point, probably September.
Yeah, we always close the contract and have everything paid out by the end of the year. Because cash accounting, right?
Well, I mean, Sandra, I just learned in, conversation a day or two ago that we weren't likely to get our detailed bid. So that's going to put a little bit of a bracket. As he said, in some cases, he's seen $130 and
Yeah.
in other cases, $160 a square yard. So, or whatever the measurement is. So I guess I'm probably gonna, with this education, guys, I mean, I don't want, this isn't Chip's program. I'm trying to wrestle this with everybody. I'm kind of intrigued with the bang for buck we get on something like doing Dorchester and Chartley. One of the dilemmas, by the way, is you can't do a little bit here and then 30 miles over, you do some there. I mean, the construction guys don't want to just do 5 minutes of work in 20 different areas. So you try to do some grouping geographically. On the other hand, whether it's Carpenter or something like Blackberry or one of those others, we got a few to choose from. I'm sort of prone to do a little of both and maybe come back to council with, guys, I think we need to spend 800 to 900,000 this year, but I'm a little bit optimistic that so far our revenue is running higher. I don't, David, you want to, do an update after 6 months. Where are we? Are we running ahead or behind on things? I think it's a great time to do that. Once we have the results, I don't think we ought to do that in late August. We could do it in mid-July. And maybe we have a 10-minute special council meeting once we have the data. It shouldn't take too long with this framework to say, okay, here's what we specifically want to do so that they can get moving. So that's sort of my guess here. I just don't think I don't know, maybe I'll be that definitive in the July meeting. We're going to fool around with this a little bit, but this is time. What do you think, guys? I mean, you see a variation of options. Chris has done a nice job of giving different ways to think of this.
So we could look at it more closely and kind of discuss.
Yeah, and so we have real numbers. My plan is to have numbers for everything you see on here so that we can make a decision based on real numbers that have been bid and look at how much that 2-inch mill and fill would be compared to the asphalt surface recycling and have specific numbers for each street regarding alternates, and then make the decision and a recommendation based on what the most intelligent spend is.
Excellent job. I mean, this is terrific information.
I think so too. I think you're definitely using a very interesting approach. It's very helpful to help us think about this.
To this point, we haven't actually specifically talked about a particular road. We asked questions about particular roads. This data, just to tell you what the roads are, you've been dealing with it abstractly, which is very powerful. And then when you come to fix the roads, specific roads, maybe we'll have some input from the
questionnaire.
By area. I don't know. I mean, there might be a lot of good information there. There might not be. There might well be.
Yeah.
Which could color this thing slightly.
This is certainly better than we've ever had.
Well, no, it really is. It's so much to chew on, and that's part of the problem. It's so much to chew on. You can get the whole big, it's a 3-dimensional model here to some extent. What Chris laid out there, I guess I'm kind of prone to begin to attack some of these rather than just spend 500,000 with a little bit here and a little bit there and a little bit there. Just kind of, I almost view that as Band-Aid, but I don't know, Chris, because it's hard for me to translate that into what that really means. You look at some of those videos and you see some of those sections and you say, oh, boy, it'd be really nice to get out and do those. And that's what he said, that 500,000 would go all around the village, but it'd be 2 square feet here. I mean, 2 square yards here and,
Not very efficient.
Yeah, I mean, we would have to,
I don't think it does. I think that's just spitting.
that's where I earn my money.
No, really, too, because they have little sections that are done and
It's-
others that not.
So this gives you a good look at what the spreadsheet looks like with the specific roads. Once I've manipulated it, dark green is all of our state routes. And it looks like a lot of state routes, but each road is broken up into discrete segments between intersections or between distinct points, because many times the road sections are in different conditions. And it makes some of the video management a little easier. So the dark green is our state routes.
By the way, everybody can get access to this database, right?
Yeah, I'll send the email out so that everybody can get into this. There's the lighter green, which is the county roads. And these are rated from low PCI to high PCI. I've sorted them that way. The darker yellow is our high volume, residential streets. And then which we have the most of, the lighter yellow, is our low volume residential streets. So you can see our low volume residential streets make up by far the largest portion of the roadways that we have. It's also the lowest PCI average that we have. So we're kind of working against the current when we've got the most roads with the lowest PCI, and that's where we're going to get our most bang for the buck in terms of raising the overall PCI. But it's the biggest part that needs to be tackled.
Now, when you send us the link to this file, can we click on this road and look at a video
You can.
in my home?
Like right here, if you want to look at, see if it works with this version that I have. So you just click on the link and it brings the video up of that portion of the road. Oh, it's running on my computer. It's not running up there, sorry.
Wow.
So
Okay, so it would run on my computer at home if I did that.
it works. And there's also a feature that
What roads are you gonna do?
it loads up all the video segments into Google Maps. So if you recall the map that showed the entire village with all the roadway conditions, it loads up all the video on a Google map that's got little nodes all over all the roads. And all you have to do, go to one portion of the map, click on a blue dot, and it loads the video up for that section of the road. So it's very handy. If somebody calls and says, I've got this question about this portion of the road, I can look at it right from my desktop. So can Dave. So can anybody, as opposed to jumping up and running out and taking a look at it.
So maybe what I'll work with Chris on is a couple of different options. So option A, here's 2 streets, here's 3 or 4 streets, and we'll do a quick video. And then here's a different option of a couple of streets. These general things where we're going to reclaim and things like that, obviously, we won't, you'll just have to assume that he's doing the right streets for that money. But, and just frame it, and maybe we'll come in with 800,000, 900,000. I guess I'm prone to come in at about that range. I don't know what your gut is from what you're seeing tonight. I think we need to spend some more money. We clearly have a surplus at the moment. I don't mean on a budget, but I mean, we've got some extra cash at the moment. So I'd rather get started a little bit, not just do what you said, Craig, which is just, not really make any headway, just spread the money all around a little bit here and there. So again, this whole meeting tonight was obviously, again, to educate. You're getting a good framework. You see the kind of data, and that helps us make at least start towards a more intelligent decision even for this year. So.
Yeah, right. I think it was critical for you to have as much context as possible as we go down this road. And, if I'm going to come forward with a recommendation on pavement, I want you guys to understand how that fits within the big picture and be working towards a strategy that we're all in agreement with, so we're all pushing the same direction.
PMI or whatever their name is was able to do. It's amazing.
Now, here's something that I'm already finding. Now, when I drive on a road, I say, no, this road isn't too bad. I'm going to go back and look at the video and look at the PCI.
Welcome to my world, Chip.
Yeah, no, I understand. But and I'll tell you what you're actually going to find is, no, you're going to find that a road with a PCI of 40 isn't the end of the world. A road with a PCI of 15, Blackberry Lane, that's embarrassing. And that's the thing that's troubling me the most here is, we've got, 5 or 6 of those Blackberry Lanes, and that's a lot of money. And I'm afraid
Or
we can't
Fox
get
Hill.
all done. And yet, Chartley and Dorchester are, do need some work. I think, quite frankly, Chartley needs more than Dorchester. I happen to walk when I do one of my 3-mile walks. I do Chartley, and it's not in very good shape. A lot of spots.
Yeah, I really believe that from my standpoint, my suggestion would be, as you ponder this, I think the best approach, as we look at the different categories that we have, these numbers up here are going to be relatively consistent, and they should be year in and year out. And as we get further down this process and we get some repeated analyses done and we see how our roadway system behaves, that also allows us to bring more consistency to this maintenance mill and fill operation that we're going to do, that ultimately where we're going to get is those first 4 categories. We're going to know pretty well what percentage of our annual road budget we should allocate to those categories so that we're maintaining what we have and we're making it last as long as we can. And really, the big question becomes, how much are we going to spend on an annual basis on rehab and reconstruction, and how we're going to split that between high volume and low volume roads? So I think that total amount is decision 1, and how that total amount is split between high volume and low volume is decision 2. And I don't necessarily think it should be 50-50. I don't think we should attack the lowest rated roads first, regardless of any other consideration, or work forward. I think some slightly out of balance, maybe 60-40, maybe 75-25, initially would be the way to go until we get the high volume residential streets, because there's far less of them that are in bad shape, squared away. And then maybe that flips, where we do 75% on the low volume residential roads and 25% on the high volume roads after the first 5 years, where we know we've addressed all the high volume roads that are below a certain threshold. I think that's the way that it starts to fit together in my mind. That makes sense to me.
Yeah, sort of like that.
Wow.
That was the intent of our special session, so.
Good job. Good job. Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you all for waiting for me. I would have hated to miss SpongeBob SquarePants. But if I'm late again, please go ahead without me. I don't want to.
You've earned yourself
want-
another SpongeBob video for the
Time.
next presentation.
I'm going to go home and watch it. I don't watch it.
Okay, we need a motion to adjourn.
So move. Yes.
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 Bye, Steve.
Thank you very much. Appreciated the presentation. It was very thoughtful. A lot of
Thank
good to work at.
All right, so Steve, you go find some more money. Get back to us here, will you?
Looks like $7,046,000.
Shouldn't be a problem.
Levy.
I put a dent in it. Chris, really good job by you and your team at your company and the pavement management group. I really enjoyed this. I'm sorry I couldn't be there, but I did listen to it and I've got the materials. Look forward to the PowerPoint slide. And this certainly gives us a lot of facts to work from versus just guessing at things. So thanks much.
Yeah, and I'll be sending more information out to everybody that gives you a little bit more to chew on from a detail standpoint.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'll yell it out.
Printed one in the mailbox.
I think that they went on a fire call and never came back.
Oh, is that what happened?
Oh, I heard that.
Chris, do you know how he turned this on?
Oh, he's two.
I gotta shut down this Zoom meeting.
Oh, here, let me see.
Yeah, it's where the people live, as you said, it's, part of this road, there's only one house. At the end of the day, that might